After choosing empowerment over dread, I began searching for meaningful and effective solutions to put into practice in my own life. Progressive Hedonist is a podcast to share the ways we can take on climate change through food and joy. On days when this seems completely impossible, this podcast is a reminder that each of us can make an impact. I'm Dana Cowan. Join me in conversations with thought leaders like Alice Waters, Andrew Zimmern, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson, and more. We can learn together what is possible. You can listen anywhere podcasts can be found and join the conversation on Instagram at progressive_hedonist.
You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
If you've been hearing a lot about or reading a lot about mezcal lately, it's because mezcal is having a moment. So what's the deal? Well, it's often handmade using pre-industrial methods. It's not cookie cutter like so much of what we eat and drink these days. And when you taste it, if you know how to taste it, you'll recognize exactly that. Recognize the heartbeat that is the lifeblood of this movement. But the growing interest means to fulfill demand, corners are starting to be cut. Well, that's not the case with Mezcal Ultramundo, an exceptional small batch mezcal from Durango. It's made from wild Lamparillo agaves harvested sustainably from a 24,000-acre ranch that's home to purple nopales, wild desert tortoises, all manner of biodiversity. And Mezcal Ultramundo never harvests more than 80% of their mature agaves. They ensure that every harvested plant is replaced in its wild setting by a next-generation seedling. If you want to taste the wild deserts of Durango, Mexico, taste Mezcal Ultramundo and know that with every sip, you'll also be protecting those wild deserts. Heritage Radio Network is proud to be sponsored by Hearst Ranch. The Hearst family has been raising cattle on the rich, sustainable, native grasslands of California's Central Coast for over 150 years. Piedra Blanca Rancho in San Simeon is the original Hearst Ranch, founded by George Hearst in 1865. And George's son was the famous publisher William Randolph Hearst. In addition to being known for building the iconic Hearst Castle, William was, like his father before him, an avid rancher. In his words, "I would rather spend a month at the ranch than any place in the world." Thanks to one of the largest land conservation easements in California history, a joint effort with the California Rangeland Trust, the American Land Conservancy, and the state of California, the working landscape at Hearst Ranch will be preserved forever. Learn more about Hearst Ranch at HearstRanch.com. I'm Lou Bank.
I'm Leanne, founder of Moneta Moves.
And this is Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps Gringex bartenders better understand agave spirits, and rural Mexico. So, Leanne, you had an article. Was it in Ink? Am I getting that right?
It was in Ink.
It was in Ink back in September of, I'm going to say this year, hoping that this episode drops in 2024. You had an article about nopales that got me so excited, and I feel like it bleeds into conversations I've been having lately about different things that bars can serve as snacks to replace the pickled eggs and the pickled pig's feet that no longer exist in these places. That predates you quite a bit, I'm guessing.
No, but I love that you shared that with me because I would have never thought that pickled items were like good appetizer or like snack things before the bar. That's a great idea though, because I will tell you why, without deviating the topic of the podcast.
Please.
I feel like right now, or I see that we have a health kind of like industry swelling up right now that investors are really interested in. And one of those top leading things that people are looking for are probiotics and gut health things. And pickled things is like the holy grail of that, you know, like even in Mexican culture. You know, you go into a taco spot, they would have like a big, have you ever seen where they have the big tank of like vinegar and like carrots, chopped carrots, cauliflower?
Escabeche.
Exactly.
Some of my best friends are escabeche.
Exactly. So I'm just like, maybe it's time to bring them back all the pickled vegetables, truly, because I'm sitting here at home with like some kimchi in my fridge, for the same reason.
God, I'll tell you, I've had this fantasy. This is still not the topic, but I've had this fantasy for a while because I make kimchi here, right?
Oh,
and
nice. Okay.
yeah, and lately it feels like I've been having a lot of people sharing with me the raw or the cooked or the pickled quiote of an agave, where they've caponed it before it's actually gone to flour, right?
Oh.
So it's still tender, and then sometimes you'll see people pounding it and turning it into tortillas, but sometimes people just give it to me to snack on. And I got when I was visiting Reina in Santiago Matatlan. She's I think 7th generation Tinacalera making pulque. She has in her oh, it's so good. She has in her store these little containers of the shredded quiotes pickled with different herbs, and it sparked something in my head that just makes me want to make a quiote kimchi.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I've never had quiote. I had to Google what it looks like, and I was just like, I've done some tours, but I don't think I had seen the little flower. It's a flower, right?
Well, you're talking the flower. The stalk itself is what I'm talking about, where you shred that stalk.
I see.
Yeah, the next time we get together for drinks, which shouldn't have to wait another 5 years, I'll bring one of those containers so we can eat some quiote.
That sounds great. Yeah.
But to get back on track,
on the topic of nopales.
Yeah, the topic of nopales. So you wrote this great article about a bunch of different companies who are making snacks. Is that accurate? Snacks from nopales?
Snacks, food things. So I interviewed a couple of founders, 3 of them. Mm-hmm. One of them, he makes tortillas from nopal powder. It's all in the dehydration of the nopales and just taking it down to powder. His name is Hector Saldivar. He's based out in California, and he runs Tia Lupita. They're out in Whole Foods. If anyone is interested in trying, they do tortilla chips, nopal-based tortillas.
And it's just 100% nopal? It's not, there's like no wheat or no corn?
It's a mix, right? It's a mix, but it's mostly nopal, dehydrated nopal. Oh. Then the second one is Nemi Snacks by Regina Trillo, and she's here in Chicago, and I think you know her.
Yeah.
She's fantastic. I had her on the podcast previously, and I was just like, let me reach out to Regina because I love the snacks. Like, honestly, I'm a consumer of them. So growing up, I used to eat these little churritos. They're like little crunchies. It's funny, Indian people just call them, I've asked my Indian friends, what do you call these crunchies? They have them too. But ours are like the spicy variety. And so because Regina was diagnosed with endometriosis, she was looking for snacks that would kind of help her with her gut versus inflame it further. And so she created this kind of as a solution for herself, but also because she didn't see Mexican foods represented. So I was like, that is such an amazing use of not just nopal powder, but if you look at the ingredients on the back of the bags of churritos that she has, they're all super clean. Amaranth flour, flax seeds, like this is the healthy gut biome central.
Hey guys, and I don't have a package in front of me, and she when I met her pre-pandemic, she gave me some, and I love them, but I don't recall exactly what's in there. But you're saying healthy, and really, it feels to me like what you mean is healthier than the average snack. This can't be really health food, right?
It's healthier than the average snack, because it's of the ingredients. Fritos. It's baked is the other thing, which does make a huge difference that it's not fried. Yeah. That it is baked. And so I think there's such care put into the ingredients and how she sourced them. And she told me a little bit about that, going to Mexico to source the nopal powder, the amaranth, like there's such care put into it. And honestly, I do not feel like when I eat a bag of hot Cheetos, because Mexicans, we love our hot Cheetos. We really, really do. But it's just not the same. So no, her snacks have been incredible.
What is Cheeto? That's a Spanish word, right? So what does that mean in English, Cheeto?
Oh, no. That's very much, that's Frito-Lay brand.
Well, Frito's also Spanish, right? Is it? Anyway.
Frito, yeah, it's me fried. No, I like the parallels here that
Hey?
But yeah, no, have you watched it? There's a great movie about that. Hot Cheeto movie, the Flamin' Hot movie. Eva
No.
Longoria made it. The guy that had you don't know about this. Let me look. If not, let me tell you. Yeah,
Please.
Eva Longoria had her hand in it. It would just drop last year, and so it's like a urban legend that the guy who used to work as a janitor at the Frito-Lay establishment had a hand in creating the flavoring that now coats the Cheetos with that flaming hot flavor.
But that's
Some
just a
people,
legend.
yeah, that well, not a legend though. It's very much true in his book. However, there's been some disputes from the LA Times about the validity of his story because he's written a whole novel about it, a whole biography. But based on that biography, they made a movie. Really good movie, might I add. Like I was just like, I am into this. This is great. I want a bag of hot Cheetos right now. But all that said, we love when someone gets our flavors right. We love that. And Regina gets the flavors right. So I really wanted to talk to her because I don't think if somebody tries to sell the average consumer, hey, my selling point, it's got nopales in it. I don't think people are going to rush to go buy it unless they really love nopales. The third person I interviewed was actually not in the food space. It was Sandra Velasquez, who I actually saw over the weekend in New York. She runs a beauty brand called Nopalera. And so what she takes is that on top of the cactus, the prickly pear cactus, there's the prickly pear. And on the prickly pear, there's these seeds, which you can then extract for oil.
Oh.
With that oil, it's used for like skin health. I actually use prickly pear oil on my skin. I don't apply makeup many days. And so it's a beautiful, healthy glow. And so she includes it in body scrubs. She includes it in soaps. I don't think it's in every single one of her products, but some element of nopales is in her products. The prickly pear was just a new one that I learned about because I had no idea that I was using products that had prickly pear oil in them before, because now it's made its way over into Sephora products. So it's the story was more about the versatility of the nopal. And me growing up with nopal, Lou, I don't know how you have nopales. I want you to tell me in a second. But for me, I grew up with nopales in salads. I grew up with them like grilled. My dad would eat them raw. He'd be like, this is the beacon of life. My dad is very passionate about food. And I told you about my dad a little bit. He's quite the character. But I grew up eating them in such a different way, and the actual like pad itself, that it was really incredible to see all the ways that it's being purposed nowadays, and to see that it really has a place for a growing market that's really interested in the health space and into creating new product space. CPG is an incredibly competitive space, but I think that these brands are definitely doing it right.
Right on. So my history with nopales, I would say, actually starts with okra, which I know that they're not at all the same plant, but
they're viscous. They've
got mucus. It's all about the mucus. As a kid, I couldn't stand eating it. Even as an adult, I really couldn't stand it. And the first time I had nopales, couldn't stand them for the same reason. But similarly, like I've had now chefs cook for me, and usually this is women in their kitchens at home, cook for me both of these things in a way that I do love them. And, and once you process them the way you're describing, also like that has blown me away. But I find it fascinating too that there's not this same where we have this conversation around agave and how it's not sustainable and we're destroying the populations and we're putting agave at risk. Like there's that conversation when in this community, right, of people who are drinking agave spirits. And they don't recognize that we're really just drinking agave and two specific kinds of agave from two specific places. But you've got this whole country full of agave. And the beauty of the agave that I would say is also beautiful about the cactus, the nopales, is that it grows in so many places where nothing else can grow.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're looking at these communities that are trying to, as you know, with climate change, are finding it harder and harder to farm things to eat locally. Here's something like in Mexico, the places where you can't grow that, you can't grow it because there's so much rain that you can grow anything else.
Yeah, no, the sustainability factor is definitely something that appealed to me about the nopales as well. Nopales, interestingly enough, prickly pear cactus. When you hear it, Lou, what do you think of geographic wise?
Well, specifically,
Geography wise, yeah.
well, I think of the desert. Is that
You
what
think
you
of the
mean?
desert.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. That's a great
Okay.
answer. Fun fact, nopales are also not only capable, but have been grown as far as Indiana.
Oh, no
So
kidding.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
even
this
more
was
resilient than agave.
more resilient than we might think. So while Mexico owns a lot of the nopal species, more than 100 of the 200 ones that exist across the world are in Mexico. They definitely grow in the US. They grow in the desert, but they can also grow in so many different environments. And that was something that actually I learned as well. And so this is an incredibly resilient, incredibly sustainable plant. And it's just like it's a beautiful symbolism of it all, what it means to Mexicans and what we can learn from that, right? I think that when I was talking to one of the founders, she's like, Sandra, she said, I get my prickly pear oil from the US. I don't go all the way to Mexico anymore. That's very much common here. There's factories that will do that for you. They'll ship you the oil. You can incorporate it into your products. That was a surprise to me. Especially when you have people like Hector and Regina for their food, still getting their dehydrated nopal flour from smaller batch artisanal places that will then, I think it was like a couple hundred tons that one factory sends, but that's still smaller scale that they'll send out across the world, right? So I think that there's a lot to learn because I do think nopales will spread. I think that consumption of nopales will spread. More foods that are resilient like that will spread. But it's also so impressive and a great opportunity to learn from people that have been doing it for decades. The folks that I spoke with in Monterrey, Mexico, they were agricultural engineers by trade. It was a father and daughter duo. Their company was called Grupo XO. And what they did is back in the early 2000s, the father was telling me he tried to get a paper published. And I think there's some sort of documentation that they sent me around that, but like a paper published about how dehydration of the nopal and turning that into powder could really change the world. And he was trying to patent something around it. They didn't get that far, but they were one of the earlier places to actually start making products. They even made their own like little candies featuring nopales, or started actually producing the powder to ship it out. And as it turns out, Hector is one of their clients now. So he buys the dehydrated nopal powder from them. Regina has another contact in Mexico. But I think that there is, when I asked Regina, I was like, hey, so couldn't you get it here in the US? Because I heard that Sandra had gotten her prickly pear oil here in the US. She's like, well, not as common. It's also intentional. So people are making an intentional decision. And I think that is so, not only is it something respectable, but it's also like something so smart, right? Like you're working with people that know the craft, that have been doing this since the like 90s, early 2000s. They understand what it takes to make like nopales in a very to grow nopales, to dehydrate nopales in a very natural way. And so I think that there's a lot of intention that's being led by these folks who happen to also be of Mexican origin, and the way that they source things, the way that they represent things, which speaks to this conversation that we were having before this podcast about when we make products, who we chose to work with and how we choose to represent the story and the business model.
You know, it strikes me too that another interesting point that feeds into the conversation around sustainability that we haven't even touched on is that you're eating the whole plant, right? Like it bears fruit and the fruit's different than the actual paddles. And the way, like my understanding, the picture that I got behind me here, right, is a field that I came upon of a guy growing nopales. And my understanding is you just take a paddle, you put it in the ground, and pretty soon it's a whole plant.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, I am actually not I did do some research around nopales. I don't know exactly how they grow. Like what are the
Well,
stages?
Well, I can tell
But
you this field.
but
That's
that is an impressive photo
Yeah, I'll
because
put
they're
this on
just
the.
coming up from the ground.
Well, he had planted them in the ground, and they were building but it's literally a whole field of it. I'll put it up on the episode page for folks to see. But so to me, it's fascinating that you have these two different products that we can consume, and we can consume the whole thing. Which reminds me of how so many communities in Mexico will eat the entire pig. Like they have specific ways of cooking.
Nothing goes to waste. Nothing goes to waste. That's very much of our culture. My grandmother had in the back un corral, as we call it, and we had some goats. And I made friends with the goats, but soon I found out what birria was about, and I realized where the goats were going. But I'm telling you, like every part of the actual produce or animal was used. There's nothing that goes to waste. And these tunas, as we sometimes informally call them, the prickly pears, they're actually like my mom would grow up like just eating them. I didn't love them because they were so seedy inside, but
Right.
but they make a great liquid, like a great juice like liquid. And sometimes what we do with that in Mexico is we turn it into ponche. We ferment that.
Oh,
right?
sure.
Like we do that with pomegranate. We just ferment the drink, let it ferment, and turns into this delicious drink. So really nothing goes to waste, right? Like I think that growing up, the other thing that I didn't really appreciate is like you look at the paddle and it has spikes all over it.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to sit there and be like, take off the spikes.
Well,
But
I didn't want to be the guy to miss a spike. Like that's why it's intimidating to me. You miss one, you screw somebody's maybe life up, but certainly day.
yeah. I mean, listen, my mom, when she would go to Jimenez, like a local grocery store here, she would buy it with the spice. She would sit at the other end of the table and sit down like 10 paddles in front of her and just say, hey, sit down next to me. I'm going to teach you how to do the spikes. She'd like take off the spikes in one part of the paddle so I could place my thumb and then be like, okay, do the other spikes. I would only last one paddle. I could not. Like that was not my favorite activity. I'm like, Mom, if you want to do rellenos, I will help you stuff the peppers with the cheese. Like this is not my jam. So the grocery stores have gotten a hang of that too. The American customer is more likely to buy, and even in tianguis now in Mexico, like they'll clean them or they'll dice them for you, right? And they sell them in a plastic bag, and you're good to go. So I do think that this is an incredible plan, and increasingly with climate change taking effect, we need to look for these kind of plants that are very resilient, right? And when you look at even, I do a little bit of reporting on like VCs. When you look at VCs that are emerging as well, I look at places like Supply Change Capital, which is here in Chicago. Their $40 million fund. They invest all in sustainable in ag tech. Technology because of climate change, because it's here. So they're trying to invest in companies that are like Nemi, that are being very sustainable about the ingredients that they use, and also technologies that can reuse materials to generate new goods.
Cool. I dig it. So then I'll put the contact information for Nemi also on the episode page so that anybody wanting to grab those snacks and bring them in can. A little harder with tortillas, but we'll put that up there as well for anybody who's got a restaurant who's looking for.
Listen, I know we have great tortillas in this city. I lived in New York for several years. I was like, I found close to good ones, but not as good as the ones I have here, honestly, and no shade to there's so many amazing Mexicans. I think the best place I got to know in New York were these North Mexicans, and they made it at home. You'd come in and they'd just be like making tortillas in the back. Patty caking it all the way. Yeah. But I couldn't find en masse tortillas. But like, anyway, I digress. Like, I do think that, where was I going with that train of thought? I'm going to bring it back. But I think a lot of the material, a lot of the goods that we're going to be looking at are incredibly resilient goods. And nopales is definitely one of them.
And, and I've started seeing some spirits in the market here that are made from those fermented colonches that you were talking about, those red cactus tunas and purple cactus tunas, distilled from the ferment of that. But it makes me wonder, like, where is the actual spirit from the paddle itself, from the cactus paddle, because there's got to be sugar in there. You drink, like I've seen people drinking the water, the juice from the plant, but I've never seen anybody fermenting that, or for that matter, distilling that ferment. Feels like that could be like something that we just do on the weekend when we get enough of it.
Yeah. No, I bet you there's so many ways that this plant can be used that we haven't yet. I didn't even get to interview. I was looking for American entrepreneurs, but Mexican entrepreneurs, they are not sleeping on this plant either. There's a brand that has made cactus leather. Yeah.
I've got the belts. Yeah.
Oh, you have? Okay. They're like engineers, I think, or something like that. I think they had like a STEM background. And that material looks really close to leather. So even when you think about like, even beyond food, when you think about dress, like that's a whole other thing.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I think unless you've got something else that we missed.
I mean, I think that the only other thing is just like, if anyone's really diving into nopales, like there's such a deep history for Mexicans and nopales. I wrote about in the story about how the symbolism of the Mexican flag, it's the nopal with the eagle sitting on top and the snake. That is incredible symbolism. Like for us, that's supposed to represent what the Aztecs saw when they discovered Tenochtitlan, which is modern day Mexico City. And so our association with the nopal goes way back. So I'm just like, I'm really rooting for Mexico to own this, to own the evolution of the nopal. And I think that entrepreneurs both in Mexico and here in the US are really hopping on that trend. Because right, sustainability is not leaving anytime soon. Like it's here to stay. There's the health trend in terms of like where investors are paying attention. There's the sustainability trend because we need it. And so because of our rich history with the cactus, despite the fact that it's grown in all sorts of places in the US, like I love that Mexicans are leaning into it and owning it from a cultural perspective. And I hope to see more people take interest in it. Among them, the agriculture folks in Monterrey told me that in Japan, they've taken interest in the nopales. And I am not surprised because Japanese people have taken interest in a lot of things that have come from Mexico, including Chicano culture at some point. So yeah, no, I think that it's going to be a whole global movement.
Look at you. You're a professional at this. You actually did a rap. That's the wrap.
That's the wrap.
Hey, thank you so much for joining me, Leanne. And as I said, anybody wanting to get some nopal snacks for their bar, or get the what was the other thing I said?
The tortillas. Tortilla chips. Tortilla chips also.
Yeah, just head to the webpage and you'll find contact information as well as a link to Leanne's own podcast. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll catch you next episode.
Thank you, Lou.
You've been listening to Agave Road Trip, the critically acclaimed award-winning podcast that helps Gringex bartenders better understand agave spirits, and rural Mexico. We're blessed with sound engineering by Roy Sierra and a theme song performed by Gabriel Oliveira and Marco Ricos. Sign up to become a road tripper and listen to more episodes at agaveroadtrip.com. If you enjoyed this podcast, please let us know. And if you hated it, well, I'm sure you'll let us know that too. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram at Agave Road Trip. Agave Road Trip is a production of 10 Angry Pit Bulls, Inc. Agave Road Trip is powered by Simplecast. Thank you for listening to Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is food radio supported by you. For our freshest content, subscribe to our newsletter. To subscribe to the Heritage Radio newsletter, enter your email at the bottom of our website, heritageradionetwork.org. Connect with Heritage Radio Network on Instagram and Twitter at heritage_radio. You can also find Heritage Radio Network at facebook.com/Heritage Radio Network. Heritage Radio Network is a nonprofit organization using the power of educational storytelling about food to build a more equitable, resilient food system. Heritage Radio Network couldn't do that without support from listeners like you. Become a part of the world's most innovative community today. Subscribe to the shows you like. Tell your friends. And please join the Heritage Radio Network family by becoming a member. To become a member of the Heritage Radio Network, click on the beating heart of our homepage. Heritage Radio Network can become addictive. Programming you hear on Heritage Radio Network might lead you to eat, drink, and listen to more programming on Heritage Radio Network. If you drink, please do not drink and drive. Drink responsibly. Drive responsibly. Eat responsibly too. And listen to Heritage Radio Network responsibly. To listen to Heritage Radio Network
Network responsibly. Wear protective earbuds. While wearing protective earbuds, do not drive. Do not walk either. Sit in a comfortable chair. If that comfortable chair has a hard seat, please remember to stretch every 30 minutes. If you stretch every 30 minutes, please stay within your defined stressing capacity. And consult a doctor who specializes in stretching. If you don't have a doctor, maybe Dr. Ryan Aycock, the Cocktail MD, can help you out. Thanks for listening.
Agave Road Trip out.